Saturday Riot Starter TV is in the building. Another grand episode. Your favorite podcast on the planet. I already know it. You know it. So we don't act like we just old friends. Welcome to Black Power Media. If it's your first time coming to our platform, I'm gonna ask you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay updated and stay on point with some of the beautiful things we have happening here on our platform. This is a platform where you can see everybody from Cornell West to Killer Mike and a Mumia Abu Jamal to a offspring of France Fanon. You know what I'm saying? This is the place to get it. So make sure you always stay in tune and on tap. Again, it's Riot Starter TV. My name is Kalonji Changa. And as always, we bringing you guests that you need to know. We come in the spirit of Gil Noble. We come in the spirit of Tony Brown's journal, and we just give it a little twist. You know what I'm saying? I come with that urban philosopher type piece. You know what I mean? We come with a style that the masses can understand, because that's what it's all about. You know what I mean? We're not here just for these bookworms who don't know nothing past what they was taught in the halls of imperialist school systems. Tonight, no different than any other, we have a extraordinary guest. I got a call from one of my comrades, Pam Africa. Of course, y'all know Pam Africa from Move. She set it off. Shout out to Pam, just turned 75 years old, and she's still knocking cats out. You know what I mean? So we definitely always honor her. But I got a call. She's like, Kalonji. That's how she talks. Y'all don't know her. I got a sister that you need to interview. I said, okay, Pam, if it's somebody that you talk about, then I know that, she on the right side of the barricades. So she introduced me to this sister by the name of Movita Johnson-Harrell. And what I liked about the story, she's an author, number one. But what I liked about her story is the fact that she comes from places where folks like I come from. You know what I mean? She comes from a background that wasn't always squeaky clean. You know what I mean? As I often say, it was necessary for there to be a Detroit Red in order for there to be a Malcolm X. You know what I'm saying? And oftentimes folks don't want that side. They want the clean and the chiseled and the pressed up, version of yourself. But in order for you to really grasp things, sometimes you got to understand where people coming from. So basically, Movita is a wife, mother, and grandmother. She has a master's degree in social work from the University of Pennsylvania. As the executive director of MECA for over 2 decades, she has advocated, cared for, and fought to improve the quality of life for disenfranchised groups. She lost her father, only brother, and cousin to homicide. Movita is a sexual assault survivor and is recovering from addiction with 26 years clean. On January 13th, 2011, Movita's youngest of 4 children, Charles Andre Johnson, 18 years old, was shot and killed in a case of mistaken identity. Philadelphia police found that Charles was killed by 2 young men, 23 and 25 years old, with previous arrest records. 26 days after Charles died, his only child, Khalif, was born. In April of 2011, after Charles' murder, Movita created the Charles Foundation, creating healthy alternatives, creating Creating healthy alternatives results in less emotional suffering. That's hard. Since implementing the foundation, Movita has worked nationally to protect and empower our youth and to address the social detriments that lead to gun violence. Now, moving on and on, she has a bio that, I'll be getting hooked on phonics. I'll be reading all day, and y'all be like, man, he not told the whole story. But long story short, she became state representative for the 190th legislative district in Philadelphia, capturing over 66% of the votes in a 4-person race. And we're going to talk about that. But again, she's had these losses in this cloud, and she's persevered. On March 5th, 2021, she lost her surviving son, Dante L. Johnson, who was 30 years old, shot and killed in a random drive-by while on a trip to California. Okay, now, that's a story. You know what I mean? That's a life story that you could write a book on. Matter of fact, she wrote a book on it. You know what I'm saying? It's called Phoenix Rising. I want you to welcome to Riot Starter TV, Movita Johnson-Harrell. Peace. Assalamu alaikum. What's happening, Movita?
Wa alaikum salam. Peace, brother Kalonji. How are you today?
Man, I'm good. I'm reading your bio. I'm like, man, and you still got stuff left to say in the book? I mean, that's
plenty.
Man, that's heavy. Man, first and foremost, I want to say salute to you for being a true warrior. You know what I'm saying? Because of the fact that, so many different avenues and roads and, and I know that many times you had to be like, man, what have I done? You know what I'm saying? What's going on? Why me? All this type stuff. But clearly, everything happens in its purpose, and we learn and we grow and we teach others if we're on the right path. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about what you've been bringing to the table. So what I would like to do is I would like to start from the top and tell us, like, give us the backstory, you know what I'm saying? Because I don't know, were you born into Islam, or was this the road, or was this a later on thing, or how did that work?
Right. So first of all, thank you. I love the name of your show. Number one, Riot Starter TV. Like I say, let's burn it all down, right? But we'll talk about that later. But I was not born into Islam, so I come from 5 generations of poverty, 5 generations of addictions, and my father was murdered on Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1975. And in that moment, I lost my mother. Right? Because my father literally died in her arms, and she began to search for something to fill the void. And she started filling it with drugs and alcohol and self-medicating her depression. Right. But in 1975, she started searching for something to fill the spiritual void. And she found the Nation of Islam. And I actually converted. My mother gave me the choice because I come from a long line of Baptists. Right. And my mother gave me the choice to convert with her. I was 10 years old and I wanted to be with my mother. I wanted to do whatever my mother did. So I have been Muslim, not always a good one, since 1976.
Word, that's deep. That's deep. So you said that your father was murdered, right? Now, I got a little bit of story on that, not from you, but just from just my lightweight search, you know what I'm saying? And I understand that there was someone accused that wasn't the murderer. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I fight for people on both sides of the gun, right? So my mother and father were separated at the time, and the police, my stepfather was from North Philadelphia, and we were living in North Philadelphia, and the police in Philadelphia hated my stepfather and his family. I mean, they were drug dealers. We do what we need to do to get by in the streets, right? Like my father was part of the Black Mafia. So they actually blamed my stepfather. They convicted my stepfather for my father's homicide. He has been up at formerly Gradford, now Phoenix, for 46 years for the murder of my father, and he did not do it. You know, my brother, who was 2 years older than me at the time, testified in court. My mother testified in court. We all saw the car. We all saw the two men who jumped out of the car. It was not him, and they still locked him up for the rest of his life.
Wow. So he's done 46 years, and you all know for certain that he's not the murderer.
Yes.
Wow. That's heavy. So how is that? I mean, what has that process been like? Because of the fact that, I mean, it's so many different webs and angles, and you know what I'm saying? How does, I mean, like, what is his state of being, and you know, how's that worked out for the family?
So he's actually, you know, been behind the walls for 46 years, trying to help the young people out on the other side of the wall, right? He's part of the Great Panthers. He's involved in Man Up. He works with a lot of organizations. And we have been trying to get him out. And one of the things that I did when I worked at the district attorney's office was try to make sure that his case was reviewed again, right? So that he could get out, because there was evidence to show that he was not the person who committed the crime. But we know that the system is twisted and the system is broken, right? And that's been the problem in Philadelphia and across this country, that mass incarceration happens because the system makes money off of Black and brown men.
That's right.
And because they are expendable, and they are expendable on both sides of the gun.
Word. So, okay, so next, and now is this the right chronological order? Your brother is murdered next?
Yeah. So, and you know what, Kalonji, one of the things I deal with is trauma in the Black and brown community, right? Because we're all traumatized. Most of us live in war zones. You know, when my brother saw my father die, something broke inside of him. And he was 11 years old at the time. He began to have behavioral issues in school and behavioral issues at home. And they did to him what they do to a lot of other Black boys. They labeled him, right? They labeled him with oppositional defiance disorder. Back then, there was no victim services and counseling for families of color. When you experienced homicide, you were expected to dust yourself off, pick yourself up, and move on with your life. And that did not happen for us. My brother began to cycle in and out of juvenile facilities, and then wound up in adult correctional facilities. My brother was up at Camp Hill when the riots happened, and something happened at Camp Hill, and he came back worse, right? But what I think really happened was he had PTSD, and he had another mental illness, and they did not properly diagnose him, and they did not properly treat him. So in July of 1991, my brother was actually chronically mentally ill. He was in an active addiction, and he was homeless and house hopping. He had custody of his 5-year-old son, and he wound up hooking up with this girl and staying at her house. And the girl's boyfriend came back and demanded, her ex-boyfriend, and demanded that my brother leave. And my brother went to leave and put his son in his lap to tie his shoes. And my brother wasn't leaving fast enough. So this young man decided to slit my brother's throat while his son sat in his lap. And my 5 year, it was like history repeating itself, right? My nephew literally saw his father bleed out on the floor, and I lost my only brother.
Whoa, man, that is, like you said, history repeating itself. I mean, it's like, wow, this is, you know, it's a real life movie, which is the case for many of us coming up in inner city community. And I'm so happy to have you on, because of the fact that, again, oftentimes we get folks whose reality is not the same reality.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's easy to judge when you don't know a book by its cover. You judge the book, you know what I'm saying? You judge the book by its cover. You know what I mean? And you see, okay, boom, well, if they see you now, you know, what possible story can you tell?
Right.
She ain't go through nothing. You know what I'm saying? Because of the fact that you're able to, you've persevered. Okay, so.
And can I say this to what you just said?
Yes.
So for those of us that are Black in the United States of America, we have had to persevere.
That's
right? So we come from the continent. So we have that blood running through our veins. So literally, while we live with trauma and we've had to endure everything that we've had to endure in this country for over 400 years, we've had to get up. I've had to get up every day and put my feet on the floor and try and do the next best thing, right? Because I didn't have any other alternative. What else was there? To crumble and fold? That wasn't an option.
Right on, right on. I mean, man, I'm glad to have you here. And I'm asking these questions, you know, it's you know, for me, asking these questions, if there's anything I'm asking that, you know, I heard you hard body, so I ain't, you know, I'm sure you ain't, you know, but I mean, good. Yeah, I'm just like, you know, I'm, you know, just hearing it, it's like, man, I mean, addiction. You said you're 26 years clean.
27, Kalonji.
27. Beautiful. Alhamdulillah. Talk to us.
Yeah, so like I said, when we started out, I come from 5 generations of addicts, right? And they had a running joke in my family that they put wine and beer in my baby bottle and blue weed in my face. And I always say, like when I got clean, I was 28 years old. And I always say that I used voluntarily and involuntarily, right? Because I used before I could make a decision or whether or not to use. But on that day, March 30th, 1975, when my father was shot and killed, I made a decision to use. At 8 years old, I picked up I picked up a drink of my own free will. And my disease took off after that. And I wound up selling drugs. I had to take care of my family. So I wound up selling drugs. I wound up dropping out of school in the 11th grade. And I just did what I needed to do to survive, you know. And when I got clean, it was literally because at this point in my life, I had 4 children. They were 2, 3, 4, and 8. And I love those children more than anything in this world, right? And I never had anybody that loved me like those children loved me. It didn't matter, you know, that I was a drug addict. It didn't matter like that I was living in the family home, 3-bedroom home, living out of 1 room in filth and squalor, no running water, illegal electrical hookup, no gas, and I could peel the dirt off the bottom of my feet. They didn't care. They loved me because I was their mother. And for me, and my husband was in jail at the time, but for me, the biggest fear had always been that my children would be taken away from me, right? And I came from molestation and I came from rape. So I was always very hypervigilant about protecting my children. So on September 14th, 1994, you know, I had done a bunch of foxhole prayers, asking God like to get me out of the addiction, to free me. And I understood when this DHS is the Child Protective Agency in Philadelphia.
Same everywhere.
Yeah, when this DHS worker knocked on my door, I understood that it was divine intervention in my life, because this woman said, look, Miss Johnson, we know you love these kids. She said, we've talked to your family, we've talked to your neighbors. She said, we know you love them, but they can't live here no more. And she said, if you don't leave today, we're taking your kids. But the key for me was, she said something to me that nobody else had ever said, Kalonji. She said, you might want to get some help. I said, please tell me how. And that day I embarked on the journey of recovery.
That's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. Wow. That is, like you said, you talking about divine decree and divine intervention. That's nothing less than. Man, I wanna rewind because of the fact that you said you came from 5 generations of addiction, and you talked about the whole, just how things went down, right? I interviewed Wayne Akbar Prey from prison. I don't know if you know who he is. He was the one of the first folks and the first black person in America to be charged as a super kingpin. He's out of New Jersey, right? So Akbar Prey, he was that dude before the Ricky Rosses and all those type folks, whatever.
Right.
He was, he was a serious cat. So I interviewed him from prison. And one of the things he talked about was in the 1940s, how his family would hide the stash in his pamper. You know what I'm saying? As a child, and in his underwear and whatnot, as he's growing up, and so it was a natural progression, right?
Yeah.
So in saying that, when you say 5 generations, I mean, I want you to expound on that, because of the fact that, again, many people that are watching this right here, all kinds of judgments, all kinds of emotions, do you hate your family? You understand what I'm saying? Just
Right.
Because of the fact that it is it's you have to be a psychologist to be able to deal with our people out here. You understand?
Yeah.
Without going to school, just to be able to navigate and maneuver through certain territories and neighborhoods in this colony, you have to almost be a psychologist, because of the fact that you got to figure out how to survive. You got to figure out how to communicate with different types of people. You can't talk to everybody the same way. You know what I'm saying? Some people you got to be careful how you speak to them, because of the fact that it can be a decision on whether you breathe or not, or whether you eat or not, or whether you survive or not. You know what I'm saying? But there are folks out here who that's a foreign world. I need you to bring it home and make it plain, as Malcolm would say, to the ignorant amongst us, because ignorance means not knowing. Sometimes you can have all the intelligence in the world and be dumb as a doorknob. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you don't know survival skills. Talk about that, and how and what it's like to what is 5 generations of poverty and addiction. What is that?
Yeah. So for some of us, we come from the addiction and the poverty. So my great grandfather was a white Irishman, right? And they drank. And I was told, literally, I had a very close relationship with my maternal great grandmother. Her husband had actually died before I was even born. And I was always told that my great grandfather literally drank himself to death. Right. So it was common knowledge in my family that everybody used. My grandmother, both of my grandparents were active alcoholics. The only person in my family that did not use something was actually my great grandmother. She was a devout Baptist woman, and she was the one who actually gave me my compass for spirituality. Right? Because what my great grandmother would tell me, like, even in the chaos of our family, she was the stability. And she would always tell me, like, it don't matter what you call them, long as you can call them when you need them. Right? And that's what she gave me. Like, even when my mother converted to Islam, she didn't damn us. She didn't discriminate against us. She still embraced us and loved us, but she still couldn't protect me from what was going on around us. Right? My grandparents both used. Listen, my grandmother and grandfather separated before I was born. And by the time I was 11, I was sitting at the dining room table with my grandmother and a gallon of vodka. My grandfather would have parties on the weekend at his house with his new wife, and I was allowed to drink what I wanted to drink. And, for somebody with addictions, they don't understand addiction is threefold. It's mental, it's physical, and it's spiritual, right? But in the core of addiction is obsession and compulsion. What that means is once you start, you can't stop. And it starts with the thought. So even as a very young child, I would go to my grandfather's house and drink, and I would wind up either sick somewhere or passed out. I'm talking about as a child, but I would still use. And then because of where my mother came from, I just explained to you the generations, right, Kalonji?
Yes, ma'am.
From where my mother came from, she had 2 parents that used. I didn't even find out until my grandfather passed when I was an adult that the abuse that was perpetuated on my mother on both sides, right? My mother was the oldest of 11, and my grandmother would go and get drunk at the bar and bring people home, and my mother would literally sit up as a child to protect her siblings, right? So all of that led to my mother using with me. Literally every drug I've ever tried, my mother was the first person to give it to me. And this is not saying, listen, I love my mother. My mother's still here. My mother still struggles with addiction. But the one thing that I understand about my mother, and we've had this conversation, is that she has done the best with what she had, right? Because her logic in the back of her mind was that she was in her own way trying to protect me from the street. Because her logic was, if I could do it at home, then I wouldn't have to be out in the street running around having people give me stuff, that I didn't know what it was.
Right. Right.
So her logic was that if we use together, then I would in some way be safe. And I resented my mother for a really long time about that. Like even when, and I don't even think I shared with you that I was in an active crack addiction. And I actually started, excuse me 1 second.
We are live with Movita Johnson-Harrell, and as you can see, she's a Black woman. She had to mute the thing and be like, "No, shut up." Shut your ass down. They come back smiling though.
Listen, we're co-parenting 4 grandchildren because my sons are gone.
Right on.
Right? So we got 3 10-year-olds and a 4-year-old that we're co-parenting.
Listen, we Black in America. This is real life. This riot started TV. This ain't CNN. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You ain't gotta explain the damn thing. We all got children, and that's how it go. You know what I'm saying? And whoever don't like it,
before I come in there.
Hey, you know what I'm saying? They got real quiet. Everybody quiet. I heard some adults before. Everybody shut up. Hey, people in my house start shutting up. I'm like, hey, I told y'all. Nah. So nah, man. That's man. So. From that, we always say that, it's chemical and biological warfare. What do you say to that? Do you feel that?
I say absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the thing. We don't make crack in the hood. We don't make guns in the hood, and now, so I got an issue with addiction now, right? And here's why. Because we've been addicted to opioids forever.
Absolutely.
They sent our sons home addicted to opioid from Vietnam.
No doubt.
Right? They pumped heroin into Harlem and cities all across this country. But then what did they do to us, Kalonji? They criminalized us.
Absolutely.
For being addicts. Look at the Reagan era, and even people want to praise the Clintons and give them an honorary Black card. They don't get no honorary Black card from me. They propelled mass incarceration. They named our children super predators. They are behind the war on drugs, which was nothing but a war on Black people. They put the drugs in our hood, then they criminalized us, then they called the war on us.
No doubt. Now it's wild that we look at it. I mean, those of us that know, we know what time it is, but other folks they don't see it, and it's like it hit me recently because of the fact that I was a cat out in the street. I wasn't a user, but I was a participant in the trade. You know what I'm saying? In the 80s, because of the fact that, when crack and all that hit the scene, it was new everywhere. And we looked at it as, you can get $5 for this little piece of thing right here. Now you go down south, that same thing would be $20. Or a sack of dope would be $5, and that's what Biggie was talking about in his rhymes. You know what I'm saying? Knicks went for 20s down south and stuff like that. That was the reality. So, you looked at it as a way to be like white folks. You know what I'm saying? You can eat better. You can drive nicer cars. You can buy clothes. You can put all the gold that you bought all on you until somebody come shake your ass down. Somebody like me come along after I switch trades and 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 you give them a donation. But the thing is, it's like we didn't see the fact that generations were being destroyed.
Yeah.
The more we got, it's like it was a what do you call it? Almost like a parasitical type situation. It's like I'm coming in and I'm sucking this blood out of you, but in fact, someone bigger is sucking the blood out of us.
Yeah.
Which is the state. And they gave us this little piece of poison. And it's just like boric acid. If you live in the hood, you know what boric acid is.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? You lay it out and roach crawl in and they take it back to the colony and
kill
it kills everybody else. And that's exactly what crack was. That's what crack cocaine was. That's what heroin was. You know what I'm saying? We got it. We took it back to the colony, killed the colony. We fat temporarily because of the fact that with the boric acid, it fills you up. And the thing is, it dries them out. So you don't have any water. They can't get the water and it kills them. And that's what happened. It dried the community out and it destroyed generations. In your case, you talk about 5 generations and different things were created during those time periods. You know what I'm saying? But we didn't see that. We didn't see that we were participating in our own demise. You know what I mean? And I'm saying that because of the fact that, this war on the black and brown.
Yes.
It's a scientific war. It's a proactive war.
It's a real war.
Yes. So the war, like you said, the war is on your black ass. You know what I'm saying? It's not a war on drugs. It's drugs being used to kill you. So yeah, I'm glad to see that you broke that cycle. You said, okay, boom, enough is enough. We're gonna change this thing around. And shout out to the state worker who had some type of conscience and said, look, you need some help, and you being strong enough to say, look, well, I love, you know what I'm saying, I want to give them a chance. You know what I mean? So, all praise is due for that situation. I want to move along. Your mother of 4, and all of a sudden the situation takes place with Charles. Like, where were you in your life at that time? And what tell us about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I was exactly where I had always wanted to be in my life. I had gone to school, I had gotten these degrees, I had done some really amazing things, and literally left Philadelphia. In July of 2007, my sons Dante and Charles were 14 and 16. They came to me and they said, Mom, we know 9 boys murdered in this neighborhood. And I consoled my sons and I talked to my sons, and Charles talked about one boy in specific. And when my sons left my bedroom, I turned to my husband and I said, it's time to go. I said, my black sons will not become statistics on the streets of Philadelphia. I had the means, I had become very successful. I created a multi-million-dollar training and education and residential business. And I left Philadelphia less than 6 months later. I packed my family up, moved to Lansdowne, Delaware County, 20-block radius, dry town. You can't even buy beer. And everybody knows everybody's dog's name. And I thought we were safe, and I went on about the business of raising my family and trying to be the best person I could be. And me and my husband were very active in service, very active in recovery, had traveled the world, carrying the message of recovery, helping people to get into recovery. And at this time, I remember that day. I remember January 12th, like yesterday. And that day, I literally pulled out of my driveway. It was a 45-minute drive to work. I never turned on the radio. I talked to God. And I thanked the Lord. Like, all of my children had been through those difficult years, and they had come out on the other side. And, for me, my experience with having children was I poured all this wonderful stuff in them. And at some point, it shines through, right?
Right.
And it was starting to shine through. I had this analogy that, aliens come down when they're about 12 or 13 and suck their brain out there right here. They turn into people you can't stand. And around 18, 19, the aliens come back down and they put their brain back in through their left ear. And they start turning into these wonderful people. You see all of that stuff that you poured into them over the years, right? And that's where we were. I was so grateful. They were conscientious. They were all working, taking care of the chronically mentally ill. My oldest was getting her master's degree up at the University of Maryland. The 3 that were home were in and out of school part-time and all worked full-time, taking care of people with chronic mental illness and intellectual disabilities and elderly. I mean, they were really good people. Charles was engaged. His fiance was pregnant. I was upset. But look, my boy was doing his thing. He was being a man, right? And I was really proud. And my son came back to Philadelphia to pick up his sister, and 2 boys who thought he was somebody else put 4 bullets in him. It was devastating for me.
Wow. Crazy, man. Definitely, I mean, I could imagine that scratch that. I can't imagine. You know what I'm saying? But I've lost enough family to understand, for lack of better words. Man, so I mean, man, how did you I mean, I know that afterwards you ended up starting this foundation. How long did it take for you to in his name or whatever? Was that a way to give back or to cope, or talk to us about that? Tell us how, because I know it had to be devastating because of the fact that, like, as you just said, you did your best, you bounced back, you know what I'm saying? You fought your way through it, and you said, you know what? Look, we ain't going out like that. And it's almost like, what was the movie? Belly. You're on your way out. You know what I'm saying? And here comes the haters. You know what I'm saying? And they think you somebody else, mistaken identity, whatever the case. But what tell us about the foundation. How did you take it from there?
So the first thing I need to say, Kalonji, is we didn't start being that family after Charles were murdered. Like, even when we were in Philadelphia, we were that family. It's always that house in the neighborhood that the kids gravitate toward. Charles fixed bikes and electronics, so it was always a bunch of crap all over my front porch. We rescued pit bulls. We would rent 15-passenger vehicles and shove everybody's kids in and take them up to the Pocono Mountains or to Atlantic City. And in many instances, we were the family that introduced these children to sand for the first time. Okay. Right? Because I told you about my hypervigilance about violence. So my logic was, if I could save the village would save my children.
That's right.
Right? So we were always that family. But what happened when Charles died, so I need to say the first thing, Charles came to Philadelphia to pick up his sister.
Right on.
And the boys walked up they actually came out of the house that my daughter was in, and she didn't notice until later. She was in the basement, and these people came from upstairs. What happened was 2 boys, the person my daughter went to see, had an altercation with another boy the day before. The boy threatened to retaliate. They didn't know the car. I had just bought my daughter this car. They thought my son coming back was the boy coming back to retaliate. So the mother in the house called up these young men to come to the house to come shoot whoever was in the car.
Wow. So it was their parents, or one of the
my grandson's grandmother.
Your grandson's grandmother.
My daughter was pregnant at the time, and she had gone to North Philadelphia to try and work, because her and the guy were on the outs, and they were trying to work out how they were going to co-parent.
Wow.
So she's down in the basement talking to him. His mother's upstairs on hyperactive because somebody just threatened her son, right? So she gets on the phone and calls these young men over to come take care of this. She didn't know it was my son. But that's not even the point. Like, even now, I told my daughter when she had her baby 2 months later that in my right mind, I couldn't allow her or her child to be involved with people who would do something like this.
Right, right. To anybody's child.
Anybody's child, right? So my son, actually, they had video from the Poppy store of the actual shooting. They had video, the last live video of my son. He gets out of the car and he goes around the corner, and the detective said, we don't know how he got out the car with the injuries he sustained. I said, I know my son. He was trying to get to his sister, and he ran in that direction, and he wound up falling in the street. People driving by stopped, called the police, got him to the hospital. He literally died several hours later in surgery. And what happened immediately after that was, because we had been that family, I had a 150-foot lawn in Lansdowne to the house we moved in. All of those young men from West and Southwest Philly that had been my children's friends were on my front lawn. Wow. The morning my son died, with bags, right? I literally had to sit all of these young men down and say, we're not doing that in Charles Johnson's memory. We're not, there will be no retaliation. We will let the police do their job and see where it goes. But I can't afford to lose another one.
Right on.
Right?
That's honorable.
Right. Listen, I wanted to kill those young men who took my son, but something very, I'm going to call it ordained, happened, right? So you asked about the foundation. So the foundation started organically within the first month after Charles's death, because everybody knows us. Me and my husband are popular. My children are very popular. And when young people started being murdered, it started by word of mouth, like wildfire. People would say, you got to call Yancy and Movita. You got to call Dante's parents. You got to call Charles's parents. They'll help you through this. So in my grief, not even a month after my son was murdered, me and my husband were showing up at crime scenes, showing up at hospitals, showing up at families' houses, walking them through the process of getting connected to services for their families, getting what they needed. If the lights was on or off, we were getting the lights on. We literally paid for janazas out of our pockets, because families aren't prepared when this happens, right? And the Charles Foundation literally organically formed. And we named it April 13th is actually the legal date, 3 months to the day Charles died. I don't even remember doing the paperwork. This is how messed up I was. But what I did realize was that helping other people was getting me through my own crisis, right? And then we wound up having a trial, Kalonji, because the two young men were eventually caught. They went on the run, and the FBI was looking for them, and they were eventually caught. And that was a whole nother issue, right? Because at first I wanted them to die. Right. But as I sat in this 2-week trial, I got to hear how one of these boys had a life similar to my brother, right? I got to hear how these boys were raised by the streets. I got to hear how one of the boys had a mother with mental illness and drug addiction. I got to hear how they had already been in the juvenile system and then was already in the adult system. But let me tell you where the light bulb went off for me. When a white homicide detective said to me, Movita, while Charles was a pure victim, we knew these two boys was eventually going to kill somebody. We had them in and out of juvenile. We even had them in and out of adult. You know what I said to that detective? So it's not their fault that my son is dead. It's your fault.
Damn right.
That my son is dead.
You didn't provide no alternatives.
These two young boys, and one of them was harming animals. If you had these two young boys and you knew something was wrong and you did nothing to save them, you're responsible for my son's death.
But they didn't do anything to save him because of the fact that they weren't in the white community.
That part.
Had they been in the white community, they'd have been in jail, and they'd have been in jail from the first time to this day.
Yep.
We might have been fighting to get them out. You know what I'm saying? That's how crazy this shit is. Wow. Man, so.
And can I add one other thing to that?
And you can add 3 other things you want to. We make my life easy. You know what I'm saying? And honestly, I wanted to, and I appreciate the fact that you backtrack, because of the fact that for me, you know what I'm saying, being on this end of the mic, you know, it's I'm trying to get it out of you without, you understand what I'm saying, without making things, you know, worse. I want to be sensitive to the situation as well.
Let me say this: you can't make things worse. Right. This is my life, and here's the thing: I understand that a law has me walking this journey for some reason, whatever the reason may be, right? And I understand that there is somebody or some people in this world that need to hear my voice or touch me or see my struggle, right? And I understand that I never have to know who they are, right? Because this isn't a life that I chose. I understand that this is a path. I believe in the cutter, right? The cutter of Allah. I understand that he has me here for a reason, and I understand that my reward ain't here. So all of the suffering that I've been through, that, like the name of my book, Phoenix Ascending, My Rise from the Ashes, my life has been one of resurrection over and over and over again, to the point where I'm in the supermarket, right, trying to find some toaster strudel for my grandkids, and I got a mask on, and I have women walking up to me, sister, you don't know me. I apologize for getting in your space. I follow you on social media. I've seen you on the news. I've seen you at the DA's office. I just want to thank you because I have a Black son. So I understand that none of this is for me, right? That it's my life.
I appreciate that, because I know, like, you been in Philly, the average person in Philly be like, man, you don't see me trying to get my toaster strudels. I don't give a damn about you see me on the news, you know what I'm saying? But so alhamdulillah, you was able to, you know, they caught you on a good day, so that's all right.
Yeah, because I have my days. But the point I wanted to make, Kalonji, was that before that 2-week trial ended, I sat my family down. We had a family meeting, and I told my family I wanted to ask for mercy for the 2 boys that murdered Charles. And my family wasn't in agreement, but they did it because I asked them to. And I'm going to just say, Allah placed it on my heart. Like, through the course of that trial, my heart started to soften, and he said, do it. And I asked for mercy, and the judge literally cried on the bench. She said 20 years she sat on the bench. She's never had a mother. Asked for mercy in a homicide trial. And one of the young men actually got a reduced sentence as a result of me asking for mercy, and will parole in 2 years, and I will not fight it.
Wow. Have you heard from them or their family since then? Or has there been any?
So the one young man who got life in prison, have not heard from him, and he continues to insult me by, you know, putting up all of these oh God, what do you call it? All of these appeals, right? And because I used to work in the DA's office, they immediately call me when these appeals come up. And I would be more appreciative if he would just take responsibility, right? He's on video shooting my son. Right. But I can't force that young man to take responsibility, and it's his right to do appeals for the rest of his life. But he doesn't realize the harm that causes me and my family every time it comes up. But the other young man who actually got leniency, the judge was going to give him 24 to 40 plus 2 gun charges. And because of my plea, she gave him 12 to 24 and dropped 2 gun charges. So for the first couple years, he had a young wife. She and I stayed in contact. He had a young son who was maybe a year older than Charles's son, and we would send pictures back and forth to one another. But we haven't had any contact in about maybe 7 years.
So your grandson's other grandchild's other grandmother, who made the call, right? I mean, was she charged? Was she? I mean, what happened with her? I mean, because it's like, you know, again, you know, it probably wouldn't have happened if she had not been, so irresponsible, for lack of better words.
Absolutely. And her son is the father of my daughter's son, right?
Right.
My grandsons are exactly 5 weeks apart. Charles's son was born, and then my daughter's son was born.
Right.
I wanted her charged because I saw her as the culprit in all of this.
No
She
doubt.
orchestrated all of this, and they used her as a witness, and did not charge her.
She was trifling.
She's very trifling.
Yeah.
I really wanted to whip her ass on the street.
Well, you didn't have to say that. We knew that. The body language alone was like, I would like to beat the shit out of her, but I was going to ask you.
Would.
That's why I said, what happened?
Yeah, so she would run in the opposite direction whenever she saw me coming, and that was a very wise move.
Okay, so the statute of limitation on that ass whooping haven't run out yet.
Haven't run out yet.
It's a bad road with you, Movita. No doubt, and I understand that, man, because of the fact that's some nothing worse to me. It's one thing for our children to move out of ignorance, but for you to be a dumbass parent is a whole nother, program, man.
Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned that you worked in the DA's office. Now, you got a hell of a life, man. It's like, boy, if I ain't, if Pam didn't tell me about you, I'd be like, man, you freestyle. But it just sounded like, man, been there, done that. I thought my life was off the hook. You got me. How did that take place? Because you went from these murders to addiction to now you work in the DA's office, and that story ain't even over. We ain't even get to all the rest yet. So
right.
Yeah.
So look, what happened was I got tired. So I participated in the strategy called the Focus Deterrent Strategy in 2013-14 to reduce gun violence, right? So The city only gave us $150,000, which was a salary for one person for 2 years.
Right.
Severely underfunded strategy. But this strategy was so powerful. It's a positive peer pressure strategy, and it addresses the social determinants that lead to gun violence: poverty, lack of education, lack of jobs, lack of training. So we were buying Pampers and milk and food and doing everything that we needed to make sure that these young people had what they needed to come off of the streets. They were prioritized. If they wanted to shoot, they were prioritized. All of them were prioritized. They had bad cases, they went to the front of the line. They got locked up, they got high bail. But if they wanted to come off the streets, if they wanted to improve their life, they got prioritized. They had one number to call for anything that they needed, right? So we did the strategy, very underfunded. We had over a 35% reduction in gun violence in the first year of a severely underfunded strategy. Wow. So what happened was 2 of the boys who they said would never, police intelligence, that said they come from generations of guns and drugs. Them boys ain't never coming off the streets. We don't care what you are from. The first calling that we did in April of 2013, we went out to dinner to celebrate afterward. Guess what? The phone rang an hour after we were at the restaurant. It was one of the boys. He called in, wanted off the streets, came in, got a forklift driver certificate, started making $25 an hour. That second boy, a week later, called in, came in, enrolled in community college. Those same 2 boys, along with 7 other boys who had came off the streets, came to city council hearings to testify for the city to fund the strategy in 2015. And you know what them suckers did? They didn't fund the strategy. You know why? Because Black and brown bodies dropping are big business, right?
That's right.
We fund $1 billion in police overtime in Philadelphia. We built multi-million-dollar trauma bays just for gun violence. We got prosecutors, judges, defenders, doctors, nurses, social workers, all for gun violence, right? But they couldn't fund the strategy, and all we were asking for was $500,000. So I ran for office. First time I ran for office, I didn't want to win. I wanted to make somebody pay for the strategy, right? So while I didn't win, I got tapped by one of the most progressive district attorneys in the country, Larry Krasner, to come in the office with him. And I went in the office and was fourth in command in the DA's office and ran his unit for victim and witnesses services and restorative justice.
Wow. Man, that's heavy duty right there. So how long did you do that? Were you involved in that particular?
Yeah, so I went in with Krasner when he took office after winning the election in January of 2018. And what happened was he said, Movita, I'll help you get the money. He had my back, like still does, to tell you the truth. But in November of 2018, we were in agreements with the city to write the grant to get $500,000 for this strategy, right? 4 days before the submission of the grant, the city pulled out. They said, we're going to take this $500,000 and fund the same shit that ain't been working. And I'm sorry, I mean to curse. Fund the same stuff in all these years that ain't been working. And they use the money to fund patronage jobs. So I talked to the DA because my seat in my district was coming open because the person was indicted for corruption. And when she resigned, I ran. I left the DA's office and I ran. I said, I'll bring the money home my damn self. And January, in 90 days, I ran a grassroots campaign because while the party said that they endorsed me, they did not want me. I knew they did not want me. And they were sabotaging my race, even though I was the candidate of choice, right? I ran a grassroots campaign in 90 days. And on March 12th, made history as the first Muslim woman to ever be elected to the Pennsylvania legislature. Wow. And if people saw my swearing in on March 25th, it went international because they do an invocation at the beginning of every session in the House of Representatives. A white evangelist Republican representative did the invocation. It was planned. And they told me that I was not wanted there. She did a minute and a half, fire and brimstone. Every knee will bow to Jesus. Every tongue will speak Jesus' name. Thank you, Donald Trump, for standing with Israel against Palestine. Muslim bitch, you ain't welcome here.
Welcome to America.
And they told me I wasn't welcome, and I believed them. And I started receiving hate mail and death threats from the Proud Boys. And I knew that I wasn't going to be there long. So I went right to work. And as a 6-month freshman with no history in politics, didn't even like civics class in school when I did go to school, I bought back $1.3 million for that strategy.
Wow. In 6 months.
In 6 months. And $5 million of community improvements.
Wow. We had an organization called the FTP movement. We might need you to do the fundraising for us, man.
I ain't do no fundraising. I went straight to the head of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, and I said, you know why I'm here. I need money for Black kids to stop dying in Philadelphia. And other people were asking for money, and he gave it to me. He gave me $500,000. I then went to the Senate. I got some money from the Senate, and then this trifling ass mayor in Philadelphia, he's still the mayor, by the way. I called him out on national news, and the DA helped me, and he wound up giving me $750,000 for the strategy.
Wow. Well, you got something good out of a Philadelphia mayor, because Philadelphia mayors have been consistently pieces of shit going back to Wilson, no good. You know what I'm saying? So we already know, and may he rot in hell wherever he at, you know what I'm saying, for what he did to the MOVE organization.
Absolutely. Osage Avenue.
That's right. Yeah, so we, March 5th, 2021, Dante.
Yeah.
What happened?
I'm still in disbelief, Kalonji. Listen, so Dante was the most beautiful baby I've ever seen in my life. He looked like a little red papoose, jet black straight hair, covered in hair. But Dante was always the male version of me. Everything. I mean, from style to swag. But Dante stood on the front line with me for the last 10 years in his brother's absence, right? And the thing for me was I saw something literally break inside of Dante when Charles died. I mean, they were attached at the hip since Charles was born. Best friends and brothers, did everything together. And Dante stood on the front line of this issue. He spoke at House Policy Committee hearings. He spoke in front of Senate. He was trying to encourage, and Dante was a street dude. Don't get it twisted. Like, street credibility out of this world, but he didn't carry guns, right? Because he didn't have to.
Right.
But he was connected, so he had blood connections, and what he was trying to do was to get his friends who were Bloods to go back to what the Bloods originally were.
Right on.
If you know what I mean.
Of course.
Right? It started off like the Panthers as a social movement, like to help their communities. And he was trying to encourage, his friends to, and they were listening to him. And what happened was Dante decided to go to California for a weekend. And it was Hood Weekend. And he came to California, and I've always introduced my children to the finer things in life. I taught my children to travel and live your life, right? So Dante and 4 of his friends went to California, went to LA, was staying at some bougie resort near Disneyland, had rented twin Alfa Romeos, had been to Cookies buying weed. Like, he was being 30 years old.
Right.
And then they went into Compton. Somebody wanted fish, and they went to the strip mall in Compton on Hood Day, and someone drove up just because it was a crowd of people and shot into the crowd, shot 4 people. And my son was the only fatality. They shot Dante once in his right eye. Damn. And I went to California on Dante's birthday. Dante was killed March 5th. And I was devastated. I mean, devastated. I couldn't even find them for several hours because several people were killed, right?
This is March 5th of this year.
March 5th of this year. And I'm calling all the hospitals, and I'm hearing, okay, they got a young man and he's in surgery, and the hospital called me, and I had hopes because he was in surgery. And then in the middle of the night, I got the call from the coroner. Right. And then I couldn't even get him home because of COVID. So I literally had to call Larry Krasner, who's my friend, who's district attorney, to call people in California. I need my son home. I know I'm not going to get him in the ground in 72 hours, right? And I thank God for the brothers in California, because let me tell you, in 2019, as a state representative, I traveled the country with Representative Ilhan Omar, the first Muslim woman to go to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. She's from Minnesota. And I met a lot of people across this country, and the brothers who actually cleaned my son, I had spoke to a packed room and they met me.
Right on.
So they washed my son to return him home to me.
Right on.
And when I finally got him home, I was able to give him a janazah in the midst of COVID it had to be at the largest facility in Philadelphia.
Give me 1 second. I gotta plug this computer up. I'm realizing that I didn't plug up. So we're gonna pause, take a quick little brief.
Yep, I gotta say something to these kids again.
Right on. That's cool. So we're gonna do this. We'll get that in order. We're gonna be right back with you in a couple seconds. This is Riot Starter TV. Stay tuned. We are back again. Riot Starter TV. This is how you know this is a real deal, down home piece, because we had to stop and I had to plug this laptop up. I'm looking and it's saying like 2%. I'm like, what's going on here? So we back again. Movita Johnson-Harrell. You was telling us about the brothers had taken care of business out in LA.
Yeah. And yeah, they washed my son and sent him home to me. And I didn't even know that. Because I wanted Dante to come home and for my husband, to wash him and wrap him. And I called the brother and he told me, he said, Sister Movita, you don't remember me, but you came out to California to CARE's 25th anniversary.
Right.
And you spoke, and he said, Sister Movita, I couldn't send him home to you like that.
Right on.
He said, I couldn't. He said, I wouldn't. And I was grateful for that, right? We never know the seeds that we plant that Allah is going to water, and it blooms and blossoms. There's something for us that's going to benefit us, because my son came home clean and beautiful, right? Yeah. But Dante's birthday was on March 30th. April 30th. He was killed March 5th and his birthday was on April 30th. And I wanted to do something very significant. So I made a call to action to my colleagues from around the country to do a day of call to action. And at a variety of locations around the country at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we had groups organized that included district attorneys, mothers advocacy groups, gun violence reform groups, street dudes. We had former Bloods, former Crips. And I was in California. My husband and I and a group of us went out to California to the location where Dante was shot. We had a huge gathering here in Philadelphia, and we had other locations around the country. But the significance for me was that I needed to go to the spot where my son was shot, right? I needed to see where my son took his last breath. And one of his dearest friends that went to California with him is still very traumatized now. He was standing right next to Dante when he was shot. But I needed to go there to release my son from that spot, first and foremost. And I talked to the man who owned the store where Dante was shot. And he said, he was a beautiful young man. My son was actually in the car. He has 2 children. He has a 4-year-old and his daughter will be 10 years old tomorrow. And he was FaceTiming with his daughter in the car. And some young people some friends pulled up, because these people came from all across the country. Some friends pulled up and he got out of the car. He told his daughter, I'll call you back, babe. And got out of the car to greet the people. And the man who owned the store said he wasn't even out of the car 3 minutes. And he hugged somebody and greeted them. My son shook the man's hand. The man went into the store, and that's when they heard the gunshots. And the man said the bullets weren't meant for anybody that was out there. And the man was actually in a wheelchair. He was 55 years old, and he had been in a wheelchair since he was 15 because he was shot in a random drive-by. And he said, we were all standing out there. It was a very large group. And he said, somebody could just come up right now and shoot because there's a crowd. He said, that's how it is.
When it's sad state of reality these days, I would say tell the people about your book, but I think we got an idea. So I'm going to say, tell the people how they can get the book. And aside from that, I know that you'll be coming to Atlanta soon. Of course, our podcast, just for the record, this is an international piece. So, but of course, we have an audience here in Atlanta as well. So tell the people where they can get the book in their area, if they can order it online or whatever the case is. And also tell folks who are here in Atlanta that about the signing that you'll be doing out here soon.
Absolutely. So my book is Phoenix Ascending, My Rise from the Ashes. You can go to my website to get it. That is Movita Johnson-Harrell.com, or you can go on Amazon. There's a hardback, there's a softback, there's a journal, and there's a workbook. But it is just a story of inspiration and motivation, because if I can get through everything that I've been through in this life and I still get up every day and put my feet on the floor, what's your excuse, right? There is none. So with that being said, I love Atlanta. My husband's son lives in Atlanta. We used to come at least twice a year before COVID. My Narcotics Anonymous sponsor is in Atlanta. So we will be coming on the 21st. I will be at the Nubian bookstore from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. on December the 21st. And if anybody in the ATL has somewhere that they want me to be that Monday or that Sunday, let me know, because I'm going to come in on the 19th and probably leave on the 22nd.
Right on. So we're going to definitely, I'm going to talk to the Jamaat out here about, about you coming through that way as well. Definitely appreciate you coming through and sharing your story of triumph, I'm gonna say, because of the fact that like your title, the Phoenix is ascending, and it's still ascending. So definitely love and appreciation to you and your family. Continue to stay strong, continue to be an example to others, and you just motivated me. You know what I'm saying? Because of the fact that it's like you said, what's your excuse? You know what I mean? If you keep on fighting, clearly Allah has you in His grace, and I mean, that's the ticket right there. So again, go to the website. The website is, say it one more time.
It's Movita Johnson-Harrell.com. Go to my YouTube page. Go to my Facebook, Instagram, all Movita Johnson-Harrell.
No doubt. Hey, appreciate you coming on, Movita, and we will see you soon. Thank you for stopping through the Riot Starter TV. And, don't whoop the kids too many times. They did a good job screaming in the background. Shout them out. Tell them we appreciate them. And I possibly just saved them. You know what I'm saying? But, keep on keeping on, and we'll see you in the whirlwind. All right.
Thank you so much for having me on, Brother Kalonji. I look forward to meeting you. And thank you so much for Riot Starter TV.
Absolutely. We appreciate you. We'll see you soon. You've been checking out Riot Starter TV, Black Power Media. And as always, we bringing you the best of the best. And, stay on point, stay in tune, and make sure you go get that book. That book's an important book. You're supporting the community. You're not just supporting an individual. We appreciate you all for coming out. And again, all power to the people. Salute. Riot Starter TV. Thank you.